Welcome to Soul of Travel. I am so happy to be sitting down today with Keri Pfeiffer from WeTravel. And I'm also, as I just mentioned to her, super happy to be enjoying her view, which we'll get to talking about a little bit later in our conversation. But Keri, thank you so much for joining me today.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat
Thank
and give you some pleasure with my background.
Yeah, a little moment of travel in my day today. So that's great. For those of you joining us, Keri is the head account manager for WeTravel, and we are going to be talking today about living at life as a digital nomad and how we can do that more ethically and responsibly. And I'm just so excited to examine this from this lens. I think after the past 2 years, obviously, there are so many more people who have been embracing this, and I think it's really important to start looking at what this means and how we can make better choices. So before we dive into all of that, I'd like to give you a moment to introduce yourself and let everyone know a little bit more about who you are in the space of travel and what you do.
Sure. Well, my name is Keri. As you mentioned, I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I guess I can go into my whole background of how I got here, and then I can talk about WeTravel and where I work now. So I lived in, well, I guess, I don't know when the moment of travel hit for me, let's say. I guess maybe studying abroad in Paris when I was in college alone, like as a female, was probably a big okay moment. But then I moved to New York City after university and lived there and worked there for 3-4 years. And after 4 years, I was pretty burnt out at my job and was kind of over it. So I ended up moving to Thailand and got my 200-hour yoga teacher certification. And while I was there, I was kind of decided, okay, I'm going to take all of my savings and just travel alone for the next, I don't know, 6 to 10 months, which I did. And while I was doing that, I met up with my now partner several times along the way, and he was doing a program then called Remote Year, where he was traveling and working with like 60 other individuals, and they all had their own remote jobs. So while I was seeing him do that and running into other people freelancing or working remotely, I was like, why am I not doing this too? So after I kind of ran out of money from my savings, I went back home, like lived with my mom for 2 months and just like job hunted for remote only jobs. And that's when I came across WeTravel, which is a payment and a booking system for tour operators. So we help travel companies with their online booking process and collecting online payments. I'm now the head of account management there, but I've been working for them since late 2017. And ever since I started working for them, I got the job. I moved to Medellin, Colombia, and I lived there for 10 months, and I've been traveling ever since. So I haven't actually really lived in the US since 2016. I've been working and traveling remotely for like almost 5 years. So it's kind of crazy. Time goes by
Yeah.
fast. Yeah.
You're totally ahead of the nomadic curve, but I
Yeah.
love that so much because I remember like the first big trip that I ever took, which I think it's such a shift and an awareness, especially coming from the United States, when you kind of set off on one of these, larger travel journeys, not just a
Yeah.
quick vacation, but when you start connecting with people from other countries and you realize that they're like, oh yeah, I travel for a month every year, or I travel for 3 weeks every spring and every fall, or like I work 6 months here and then 6 months there. And you start to hear these things that you're like, wait, this exists. We don't
Yeah.
talk like this where I'm from.
A hundred
So,
percent. I remember meeting so many people doing their gap years, and I was like, I'm like such a fan of gap years. Like I remember meeting 18-year-olds that were saying, no, why would I ever travel or excuse me, go to university and like choose a career path? And I like don't even know what I enjoy in life. Like obviously I'm gonna take a year off traveling and figure that out first before I spend all this money going to university. And I was like, you're so wise. Like, why are we like as Americans not embracing this and like so like stigmatized, looked down upon as a gap year? But I think it's such a, anyways, I agree with you.
yeah, no, and I also have remembered seeing like through my travels, seeing younger children traveling. And again, it's just this thing. It's like it's not really modeled for us. And so when we say we want to take our kid and travel to Africa or Croatia or I don't know, anywhere really for a large amount of time, people say, "Well, why would you do that? Why that's not responsible. You can't pull them out of school." And my thought is just like, wouldn't we just like live school? Like
Yeah.
I remember seeing these kids having these experiences, and I just remember thinking, these humans are having the most valuable experience they're ever going to have in their lives. And they're like 9 or 10 years old, and they're going to carry that with them forever and not be like some of us who are fortunate enough to have it maybe in our right after high school or college or 20s, or maybe not even till your 40s or 50s, when you kind of get that sense of who we are as a global community by traveling. And so I agree with you. I feel like I wish a gap year was mandatory, because you really start to get a deeper sense of who you are, what you value, what you're curious about. And it really changes when your context for living and exploring changes by traveling. So I'm so excited that you are, I'm grateful that you had that awareness and that opportunity. And then you like had the ambition to make that your path. So that's so cool to hear that part of your story.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm no complaints on my end.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Well, so as we go a little bit more into this, I want to end kind of talking about living more ethically as a digital nomad. But I really want to first dive into travel technology and its value outside of maybe the context that we would understand it in, which is just, everyone is pretty familiar at this point with booking platforms. This is what we know tech and travel is. But from a operator standpoint, we also know there's all these other systems that we use. And I think especially the last 2 years, we have seen how technology from all different areas has influenced our lives, influenced travel, and enabled people to live in the way that you're living. What do you see as a way travel has shown up as kind of a force for good, or to create? One of the things I've noticed is it creates a lot more accessibility to travel. It's something you and I have talked about with, virtual travel payments, travel education. All of these things have gotten wrapped into travel technology. I just love for you to share anything that you have seen that has really inspired you, or that you think is important for listeners to be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I think travel and sustainability and tech specifically, when it comes to travel, is like a topic that's not as talked about as often. Um, but there's a lot of like points to it and things to be like learned or unlearned. Accessibility wise, you're 100% right. Like the form of online payments and being able to, for a tour operator, offer payment plans to their clients is something that probably wasn't as common 10 years ago, but now giving someone the option to pay for a $2,000 trip, which is a lot of money, and probably a big thing for a lot of people. They can pay for it now, maybe over a 12-month span, whereas previously it might have been kind of deposit and then you pay in full. So finding like a tech or an online booking system that offers like payment plans makes things a lot more accessible to your clients, and they'll appreciate you for it. And we're also seeing, especially at WeTravel, like a lot more demand and ask for like the buy now pay later, which is quite popular as well in buying clothes or products online. But I think it's going to become more popular in travel as well, where these options kind of like provide somewhat of a loan to the travel company temporarily, and buy now pay later situation helps both parties get more bookings. From the online tour standpoint, of course, like not everyone has the privilege to travel. So if I can take an online tour and learn about the Afro-Latino community in Brazil, for example, like I can learn so much more about a country and even gain knowledge before traveling there if I want to. So it helps you kind of research a destination, but also like feel like you're traveling there. So online tours, I think, were super cool that they obviously everyone pivoted when COVID hit and everyone started doing them. And I've seen a lot of companies stop doing them since, but I kind of hope they still stay around to some extent, because It's really cool from an educational standpoint, but also for everyone that's not able to travel. And then, of course, around like climate change, which is a huge topic right now too. We can get into all of the carbon offsetting calculators that are more and more common, or carbon neutral, carbon removal calculators. Those are, I mean, if almost all major airlines now, I've been booking a lot of flights lately because I still travel. Not only do they show you, the carbon emissions that you're actually putting into the world based on the flight that you choose. I know Skyscanner and even Google Flights now, they have the little greener option. So you can choose from like the greener flight when you are buying. But then a lot of them are incorporating these like calculators and offsetting or removal options into the checkout process. So once you are booking and paying for the flight, you can check a little box and say like, yes, I would love to remove this or offset it for X amount of money. And here's the program that we're supporting. So I've seen most airlines are doing this, but more and more tour operators are starting to do it too. A lot of them build it into their pricing already. A lot of the big players do, like Intrepid and other like big companies, but small tour operators historically just haven't known where to start. So it's about like educating them, which we're trying to do, giving them options. Maybe we're thinking about building a calculator into our checkout process in the very near future, so people can take a box and say they want to enable that for all of their tours. Things of that nature. So that's like a whole nother level of travel tech that's becoming more and more popular, and I think those products will continue to grow. I'm not going to keep going because there's a lot of options, but yeah.
No, I think it's so amazing. And I think the simplicity and the education and the ease of use, I think those are all things that are really important. I think that's a huge barrier, is if people don't understand, one, the impact that they're making, and then two, how to do something about it, we're not going to move forward. And so I think it's really, I remember, I mean, I don't even know, it feels like it was forever ago, but the first time someone talked about a carbon offsetting tool and how cool it was to just be able to put something like your flight in or your hotel stay, and to have that awareness, because it's just not something that we think about. It's almost like when they started putting the calories on your menus, right? And you're like, what? Oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
we just had no idea. And then you see that and you're like, well, that is not okay. So here's, I mean, obviously on a much more important and impactful scale, but like, we just don't know. It's not something we've ever had the space for understanding before. And I think it's just amazing to see the simplicity of some of these tools to be able to do that. It's almost like a fun thing to do. It's interactive, then you see it, but then, like you said, then giving you this option to say, hey, do you want to offset this now? Do you want to at least contribute this much towards, offsetting this flight? And I think that is such a great way to just bring travelers into the conversation, because now they're already thinking about it. Maybe they're going to think about other ways that they can extend that throughout their travel. And like you said, operators, hotels, many other parts of the tourism industry are also starting to look at how they can create kind of a similar process through their use of products. So I think it's a really interesting time to see how technology is aiding this ability to create change.
Yeah, definitely. And I think consumers are only going to more and more demand it from their tour operators, hotels, airlines, whoever they choose. So if the company's not getting on board, they really should be thinking about it if they want to even stay competitive, honestly. So yeah.
Okay, so to go on, I think how you and I connected, and I'm trying to remember, but I think it was through the RISE pilot program. You gave a presentation, and for our listeners, RISE Travel Institute is an organization that I've definitely mentioned on the show before, but Keri received her certificate in sustainability and anti-opression travel, which, when I saw this program, my mind was just blown a little bit. I was like, who are the brave souls that are creating and tackling this program? Which I connected with Vinci and them right away to just be like, yes, like I'm so excited this is
Yeah.
happening. And then I know you were in their pilot program, which is now their flagship program. And for anyone who gets excited after they hear what you have to say, they have their next cohort is in this fall and they can sign up in June. But through this process, you really dove into responsible life as a nomad and like really started examining what does this mean, what questions should I be asking of myself, what is the impact. And so I want to just open up our conversation to all of the things you discovered, the things that you want to share with people now who are curious about how they can bring these things into their own life and lifestyle.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I'm also, spoiler alert, I'm going to be a guest instructor for them. So I will be doing a short course with Rise that's coming out in a few months, specifically on this topic. Just like an hour course on like how to travel ethically as a digital nomad. And I'm not like an expert by any means. I just want it to be kind of a conversation where I think a lot of, I mean, as we talked about before this, the rise of people working remotely and traveling is only continuing, and it has been on the rise ever since COVID kind of, came into our lives 2 years ago. So it's only going to keep growing. And I think from traveling, and the reason I chose this topic after doing the flagship program as my final project, let's say, is because most people that I run into when traveling at co-working, co-living spaces, et cetera, like it's not something on their minds. It's not something they're thinking about. They just think it's really cool, which it is, to be traveling and working remotely. So I would just love more people doing it to actually have the awareness and want to talk about it. And I would love for more. I kind of built my capstone project around as a presentation or a conversation that potentially companies like Selena, for example, which is a co-working, co-living space. They have locations all over the world, or maybe Remote Year, which we kind of touched on earlier, these huge programs that are basically profiting off of this. I would love for them to almost create courses or to educate people that are coming through there if they want to sit in, maybe a happy hour with a chat or something like that. I just think it'd be really cool if more companies that are profiting from this idea would also add this in. But there's so many layers of how you could travel. I think one of the first things that's was eye-opening for me was just I actually spent time defining the difference between an expat versus a nomad versus a digital nomad versus an immigrant, and kind of how privilege and race and all that kind of comes into play. So I think I have it here. So it's super interesting. I mean, if you don't know what a digital nomad is and you're listening to this, it's a person who earns a living working online remotely in various locations of their choosing. Some people just call it a location independent traveler. And then if you know what a nomad is, someone who was in the past had no permanent home and they traveled from place to place, historically for livestock or farming. And then I thought the interesting comparison was between expat and immigrant. So according to Wikipedia, an expat is an expatriate, often shortened to expat. It's a person who temporarily or permanently resides in a country other than their upbringing. And the word comes from Latin terms. And then immigrant is a person who comes to live permanently in a foreign country. So they're almost the exact same definition. And I feel like the word immigrant has this really strong negativity around it, the stereotype around it. Usually people of color are called immigrants over people who are white. So I thought that was something to really just have people even think about, or let's sit with, because a lot of digital nomads call themselves expats when they're traveling, and meet so many expats that have moved to locations after digital nomading for some time. And just the comparison of those two words are so strong to me. So that was the first thing I did, which was super eye-opening and crazy.
Yeah, that is brilliant. And one of my very favorite things is to use the contrast of definitions of words to understand the context of words. It's when you take two words like that and you look at it, it creates all this awareness. And I love the thinking about why does one have this negative connotation and one is almost this glorified, celebrated, championed thing. But like you said, it's almost the same action. It's just this context. And obviously the motivation of becoming an expat and becoming an immigrant are not the same, but like the end result is fairly similar. And the way we perceive those two sets of people is entirely different. So I think that I love that you started there, is just like trying to understand who you are in this picture, who are the other people. I was just talking to someone else about the definition of travel and like why people travel. And we always
Yeah.
just think a lot of recreational travel, but there's so many reasons why
So
people are traveling. And so then that again, like when you talk about how travel is impacting, the world or the environment, you have to spread your thought about why we travel and who travels. And I'm sure we could go down a rabbit hole, but I loved that you started there. So after you did that, where did you go?
So from there, I really, so the caps or the flagship program from Rise, like breaks it down into, I want to say it's 10 different sessions. So I won't go into like what every session is, but what I did is I took kind of the foundations of each session, and I kind of worked it into like a presentation and related it to traveling and working remotely. So one of the next things I kind of looked at was also like power dynamics and digital nomads. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Wheel of Power. If you saw that, if no one is familiar with it, if you Google it, it's a wheel that in the center is like the height of privilege, and then the farther you are from the center, like the less power you have, the less privilege you have. And it compares you on several things, from like accessibility. So are you a able-bodied person? Are you a disabled person? Your race, your skin color, your economic status, etc. And I kind of said like, okay, like let's all take a moment to compare like where we are on this wheel of power, and then let's compare that to if you fall farther off of this wheel, like farther from the center, can you even be a digital nomad? And like can digital nomadism even exist without like inequalities in this world, which is a really deep topic too. And I mean, a lot of the times the answer is no. I mean, working and traveling remotely, I see that most people are able-bodied people. Like we could go down the whole conversation of even accessibility. If you're a person using a wheelchair, you might have a lot harder time to travel and work remotely, like all around the world. Or if you're someone who is like blind, for example, you would also have a lot of issues as well that you run into. I can't think of the last time I walked into a co-living space and they offered, braille or anything along those lines, at least visibly or like actively. So I could go down the whole accessibility channel of things off of the wheel of power, but then there's also just your race, the color of your skin. A lot of people, I mean, I've seen it changing a lot more and more, but historically, even in the marketing, if you Google the word digital nomad, it comes up with like a white, like cisgendered male. So that's what you see. He's working on a beach and he's chilling. Maybe you now get some female like marketing as well, but the marketing I think needs to change a lot around like what is a digital nomad and what do we see and think of as one, in order for it to be more accessible to everybody and more inclusive. So I go down that path as well into marketing, which is a huge topic.
Right.
What else could I go?
Yeah. Well, and I love too that, you look at this through the context of being a digital nomad, but it's definitely like goes right across the board as well, right? Like if we look at marketing in general and travel, and if we really want to like start getting out of control, like at marketing and everything in general, right? I mean, these are what I really loved about this program, what I loved about your presentation so much was that you took all of these things that have come to forefront in conversations that have been difficult conversations and just like tackled them right into being a digital nomad, which I just thought was, it just was something that, we're just starting to have all these conversations. And I just love how you applied it and started to get us thinking. And I think this thinking process is really the important thing. Like if you've never sat and thought about this, like that is okay. I think most of us haven't. And that's really the point of this conversation, is to create space for those questions and for you to be like, oh, I've never really thought about what it might be to be someone who isn't an able-bodied traveler. Like I haven't had to face that. So what does that mean? I have never looked at marketing and not seen myself represented. And so I didn't have a reason to question, but what would that look like for somebody else? And I just think across the board, these conversations are happening. It's so powerful, but I really loved how you applied this to this circumstance, and especially as a digital nomad. I mean, you are moving through cultures. You have this opportunity that if you are creating awareness and creating conversations, to really learn so much more and to like examine things in a different way
Yeah.
because you're constantly moving. And so I think it's so powerful to open the door to this sort of reflection and awareness in this space. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would even add that, like, I think another trend that I touch on too is, I think it came out of COVID. I think it gained also popularity in COVID even more than it had before, was like spending local. Like right when COVID hit, everyone was like, okay, like we need to support all of our local restaurants, everyone that's not like corporate owned, we want to support. And so people were like bringing that over into travel. They were like, I want to support like the mom and pop, the boutique hotel. I don't want to stay at the large Hilton or whatever it may be. And I want to support all the local restaurants when I travel. So I think as digital nomads, we have to think about that too. Like what Airbnbs are you staying at? Is it owned by like a large property management company? Is it owned by a local? What co-working spaces are you using? Are you going to like a large WeWork every time you're in a new country, or are you just going to the local one? Because there is usually a locally owned one. Or are you going to the local cafes to work, etc. And then I also even brought it into like where you stay locally can like when you're in a new location as well can get interesting. I think a lot of digital nomads would say like, okay, we want to like stay in the like up and coming area, or we want to stay in the cool area, or the area that's cheaper, which it's just cheaper to us because we maybe make USD, but we're living in a country that does not, or we make euros or pounds or whatever it may be. But then I like kind of examine the whole idea of gentrification and like, are we actually just gentrifying all these neighborhoods? And people, I mean, you can argue it both ways. People say like, oh, you're not really there long enough and you are still spending locally. And but if everyone's traveling remotely in mass, then we are kind of there long enough, I think, if everyone keeps doing it. So I mean, I've talked to some other people about it, and I've always decided like, okay, if we are going to travel, we should just stay in the already gentrified area, because I don't know if I want to make it worse by looking for the cool up and coming areas. I mean, who knows what the exact right answer is? It's not black and white. None of these conversations are, but that's also a super interesting thing to think about that I don't think people do often.
Yeah.
As well.
Oh, that's so good. Like, I feel like I feel like you and I both must do the same things when something like lands on our plate. We're like, oh, let me pull this like apart forever and find all of the different threads within it. So I love that about the way you look at things. But I was just talking with someone about this in travel as well, is, as travelers, we are, we're bringing ourselves somewhere. So that means we're already creating a ripple in the continuum, right? Like we're already shifting something. And then are things rising up to meet our needs? Is that process already creating something shifting, culturally? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so interesting when you think about it. And then you think about, the privilege that you mentioned and who is having these experiences and where we're inserting ourselves into places. And it just gets, and I think I'm going to just make this assumption of you, but I think we're both really good at looking at it with a detached lens and being able to think about it from all these different perspectives, and really like evaluate it. I think some people would really, it would become too personal for them, and it would be really hard to detach and think about like, what are all these different perspectives? And so for anyone listening, if you're like feeling a lot of resistance about any of these things, like that's okay. Like if this makes you uncomfortable, that's okay. Like, I think these are really hard conversations and really important. And I think they have to get broke down a little bit before most people can like get in there. Like, I don't think everyone is ready to just be like, I want my mind blown and I want to feel uncomfortable and I want to figure this
Yeah.
out. And I feel like we both are like, I'll take that.
Oh yeah. I mean, listening to some amazing speakers and doing like decolonizing travel, like workshops, that those are hard for me. And like, they should be. And like the idea of like, should I even be traveling at all? Or am I just continuing to colonize like the world? We're not going to dive into that because that's really tough conversation. I don't think, I'm not also an expert to speak on that topic, but there's some amazing people that are. So that's a whole nother it's a whole nother
Yeah.
ball game. But 100%. And on the note of even choosing a location, I think I went into that in my presentation as well, is like a lot of digital nomads choose like where are you going next. They talk to other people, they like look at what's trendy on Instagram, and they look at all like, so like the whole idea of responsible photography, and maybe like, should you be geo tagging all of your like locations when you do travel, and like, are you contributing to over tourism, if you are, and like also who are you photographing, excuse me, you know, are you taking photos of people without their permission? Are you just like, oh, these kids look really cool, so I'm gonna take a photo of them? And then like, how are you even positioning that? If you did post it, like, what does your caption say? Like, what perception does that, like, whatever you've written, how does that give? Even if you don't have a lot of followers, someone still read it and someone's still like influenced by you. So yeah, I feel like I wish, yeah, digital nomads or people traveling work remotely would just like give a little bit more time before they decide like where they're going to go and why. I think people just kind of get in this like, oh, go, 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 go. So that's a whole thing. And then we could even talk after that on reflection, because I think, but I don't want to, yeah, if you want to say anything on that, you can. But then also on the go, 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 like I've been traveling for 5 years, and like I go from one country to another, and it's like, do I have time to reflect on the last 2 months that I just spent in Costa Rica, which is where I am now, by the way. I didn't mention that if anyone is watching. Yeah, I don't. And I think so like the importance of reflection and like journaling and like taking the time to actually like sit with your feelings and like think about it is also super important, and also overlooked. Whether you're doing a week-long trip and just going home, like, are you going to reflect on it? Or if you're traveling, especially like consistently over and over, you probably something you don't think about, which is also important.
Yeah, and it gives so much more value to the experience, right? Like if we just have this moment that only exists in this brief amount of time, it's like, if you're looking at it from a larger scale again, like what was the overall value of this experience versus maybe the cultural, environmental impact that I made? If it was this quick getaway that you never internalized anything from, well, it was great in that moment, but what about afterward? And if you are
Yeah.
traveling somewhere for, a longer period of time or short period of time, and you sit with it and you bring it into your life, and that influences how you move forward, then I would say that is creating such a larger impact. And I think that's where travel becomes really important. And then that's where the balance, I think, becomes more even, because when we're really invested in our travel experiences, when we're really pulling from them to grow, to see how we can create change, to look at all these topics that we're talking about and see how they're impacting us and others, then it seems like it's worth whatever other impact that we might be having simply through the act of traveling. And so I think it's really valuable. When I started in the industry, I always thought the reflection was more about myself. But now, as I have been in it and have been thinking about being more mindful in travel, I really realize that reflection, while is valuable for me, it is what creates then that external force. And
Yeah.
it's the catalyst for people that end up starting, nonprofits, or even begin like saying, I'm only going to travel within the responsible travel values, or it's you have to take that time in order for that shift to happen. Otherwise, like you said, you just keep going from the next to the next to the next.
Yeah, 100%. And luckily there's a lot more tools out there, and like workshops and online. Again, another thing that, like, I guess it's one of the silver linings of the pandemic is like things have just shifted a lot more online, and they're probably going to continue. So hopefully a lot more of these like programs or abilities to learn or like unlearn become more accessible and keep growing, like similar to the Rise program. Whether, yeah, and they even have like the amazing scholarship programs which they offer too. So financially, it's like, it doesn't seem like I can pay for another online course. Like a lot of these programs are offering like sliding scale payments or scholarship programs so that it's accessible to everyone to learn, to be able to hopefully shift the mindsets of travelers all over the world. So yeah, totally.
It's amazing. I feel like that would be such a good spot to just introduce a little bit more about the work that you do at WeTravel. I know one of the things that I loved about what I saw from the business there was that shift during the pandemic and the education and the content that you started creating. And we were kind of I don't know, casually joking before we hopped on here about like, what do you do when you're a travel booking platform and a global pandemic happens? I mean, I had the same feeling. I launched my business and then like had my 1 year anniversary and then went into lockdown and canceled everything. And you're like, well, like, what do we do? Are we going to
Right.
try to keep this business going? What does that look like? And I loved seeing the people that started showing up in the space of education and community, which I think you did really well. I loved the content that you started creating. Can you talk a little bit about what that experience was like and how other people, other travelers and professionals who are listening can find out about that and look at it afterward here too?
Of course. And I apologize. I keep muting myself. I feel like there's cicadas just going like nuts behind me. I apologize for any
I
background
can't
noise.
hear them, so it's okay.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay. Yeah, so like you mentioned, the pandemic began and we were like, what are we going to do? I was in sales and with the other two people also in sales at our company, we're like, we can't sell anything. Like there's nothing to sell. Like no one's paying for travel. So I mean, we hit the ground running. First and foremost was just like supporting our clients, that our existing clients in any way we could. So just like having really tough conversations about them with them about anything that was going on and like all the cancellations and chargebacks that they were dealing with and trying to support there. We were also supporting them right off the bat, like trying to support them with tools to get small business loans. And we partnered with a few companies. So the first thing we did was like really just help support our existing clients. And then our sales team just kind of went into, okay, let's just start like doing webinars and or online chats, like in any way we can, whether it's interviews in short form, et cetera, just to like help and keep our audience engaged. Cause we do have a good amount of, large amount of travel companies that use us and follow our content and what we're doing. So we were like, let's start creating webinars to get people engaged. And it really started mainly as a tool to, just keep the conversation going with our clients. And it didn't really start around the sustainability topic. And the first and foremost, we started helping a lot with like, how am I going to get through COVID conversations, like maybe online marketing conversations, how to shift your voice during this time. Every small travel company wants to know how to get more bookings and more money. So like marketing is a huge thing, or online advertising was a huge topic. So we did a lot of those conversations. And then we joined Tourism Cares as a company, which is a great organization that you guys can look up if you're not familiar with them. And I started diving deeper also into my own like sustainability journey and responsible travel journey a few months prior. And so I said, okay, if I'm going to host these webinars or moderate these webinars for our company, like I want to do them on these topics. So we started doing them. I realized that a lot of our audience really wasn't educated on anything related to responsible travel. And there was a lot of conversations geared towards the traveler on how to be more responsible and ethical, but not towards the tour operator or like the tour provider on how to do it. So I was like, we could like totally, this is a good way to not only promote this topic, but also like get our clients engaged and hopefully get them to be more aware and on board with this idea. So we started doing like kind of a short series of sustainability or 101, like what does it mean to even be a sustainable tour operator, and like how to get started, and just like 4 or 5 quick like ideas of where you can go and what you can do now. And that was a really great panel with the CEO of Tourism Cares, but we also had some other big names on there, like the Travel Corporation and I forget who else is on it now. Colette was on it as well. But yeah, we have all those. We have all of the recordings on our YouTube channel, WeTravel's YouTube channel, if you're interested in looking them up there. And then we went into like more specific topics. So we did one on, animals responsible, like animal tourism, I guess you could say, or how to kind of be aware with that in your products and what you're selling to your clients. We did a conversation around how to responsible tourism in like rural and indigenous communities. We did one around accessible and inclusive travel. We just recently did one around how like best practices for pricing your tours, but how also like pricing and payments can tie into sustainability. We did that with a really cool chat around that as well. BIPOC travel, and race travel, etc. So yeah, we like started doing all these great conversations and they were picking up momentum. We got tons of not only our existing clients to listen, but we were getting tons of new people listening as well. And so it eventually, in a small way, turned into a small like lead generation tool for our sales team as well, because they can reach out to these people that are joining and they might want to know more about us thereafter. And we've continued to have these conversations and create webinars. We're doing another one later this month, all about empowering your travel community, specifically women in travel. And it's going to be a great roundtable on how female entrepreneurs can create like a community around women-based travel. And so we also created the WeTravel Academy a few months ago. So if you look that up, I think it's just wetravel.com/academy. Yeah. And from there, you can find all of these awesome like blog posts and articles that we've written on so many different topics of how to support you as a travel entrepreneur, but also we have all of the past recorded webinars we've done. And then we also have newly launched courses in there as well. So the first one we launched back in November was on awareness on disputes and chargebacks and how to prevent them and just understand them better, because unfortunately, that's a whole nother topic we could talk about, but that was a huge deal right at the beginning of COVID with a lot of our clients. All of their customers were calling their credit card companies and trying to get their money back when they weren't getting a full refund. And sadly, I think most clients don't realize that the tour operator didn't have the money. They were the middleman. They had already put the deposit down at the hotel. They had already given it to the airline, et cetera. So when you're disputing the charge, you're almost taking the money away from them twice,
Right.
which is a bummer. Yeah. So, and a lot of companies have never dealt with that in mass before on this scale. So we just did like a huge course on like, let's get people educated on what they are, how to potentially protect yourself from them in the future. And so that came out. And then we have launched, we're launching 3 more courses. We have a few other courses on there now, one specifically for retreat organizers as well. And then we have another one on how to target Gen Y and Gen Z travelers as well. And then we're coming out with 3 more in the next month around, I want to say it's content marketing, how to better use WeTravel, and then also like pricing and payments. Again, I think we're turning that into a full course of like how to better price and organize your payments, but might also do one on cyber security, because that's a cool topic. We just did a webinar on that around how to better protect your travel company from online. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but we've been
Okay, no, I love
yeah.
it. I think it's amazing because I mean, it wasn't just like this one-off or 2 things. It evolved into this whole other part of the business, which I think is so valuable. Like obviously, if we didn't have the downtime of the pandemic, you probably wouldn't have the time to have created that focus. But I think the sense of community and value that you're able to add now through this process, better understanding your clients, better understanding their travelers, like so many things happened out of that make it now such a more valuable tool, which now it seems like, why would you turn back? Like, this is an amazing thing that you created. I feel that way a little bit about this podcast. Like I would have never done it if I had all these trips running and I was out guiding trips, which, don't get me wrong, I'd love to be doing that. But I also feel like these conversations have been endlessly valuable, and the community that has come from it is also really important. And so it's just so interesting to see it will be really interesting to look back and reflect on this period of time, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and see what all of this connection and value and content and conversations created, because we've done it at such a mass scale. Like, it would have taken a long time probably for us to start talking about one or two or three of these topics, especially around anti-oppression and travel. Like, it would have taken us some time to get there. But all of a sudden, with all of the political climate and all of the things that started happening as a result of pandemic, and the way travel started looking at themselves in the space of these conversations, it just seems like it exploded very quickly. And so I am like, I'm just so proud of the people in this industry who decided that they were going to jump in and tackle these things, and also just continue to like support one another and support their clients. It's been like amazing. And again, for like to pull back and look at this as a bigger thing, as if I were not a piece of it, like I just have loved witnessing it. And so I'm grateful for companies like yours that have done that during this time, and for the sessions that you we're hosting, and it's been great. So that's just me like telling you that I think that you're awesome. Basically is what's happening.
Oh,
I don't know if there's
thank you.
anything for anybody else,
That.
but
I appreciate that. No, I mean, I couldn't agree more, because there's so many companies and just like people that have like you mentioned, like to your point, like people just hit the ground running, and they just made such amazing content. And there's so much out there that's like recorded that people can find, but there's still like new stuff coming out constantly all the time. And one of the great things is like almost all of it, not all of it, but a lot of it's free. And that's amazing, like resources to learn all of this great stuff that you previously wouldn't have been able to. And people had a little bit of downtime to spend the time watching it and like in absorbing it. So I really hope that trend continues, because even today I find online stuff or courses or about like so endless different topics that I'm always like, I want to watch this, or I got to watch this later. And it's like, I hope that trend continues on and is here to stay, at least for a little bit. But
I agree. I feel like my master's in tourism is just irrelevant at this point, because everything that you need is out there, and then it's in this new context. And I just think it would be so cool to be starting out and being shaped by what has been created in the last year when you move forward in creating your business. So well, I have loved, this has been so fun. I knew it would be fun, but this has been more fun than I thought it would be. So I really appreciate this conversation, Keri. Before we end, I have 7 rapid fire-ish questions. And then just to remind listeners where they can learn more about WeTravel, can you just remind us of the website?
Yeah, so it's pretty easy. It's just wetravel.com.
Okay.
So they can head there, and then you can easily find our academy as well if you want all of that free content that we have and educational content. It's wetravel.com/academy.
Yeah, I really encourage people to do it. I feel like every type of travel, every level of traveler and travel professional, I think there's something that would just pique their interest and get them, like I said, asking more questions, even if they're not walking away with like this like newfound sense of a strong answer. I feel like the question is so good. So I encourage people, but I also love that there has been like really specific business focused content as well, which I have found valuable. It's like both things. So
yeah.
Okay. So first question, what is your favorite book or movie that offers you a travel escape or inspires adventure?
Oh, wow. A travel escape. Wow, you should have prepared me for this.
I feel really like don't need it. You're living a travel escape. So that's
I wouldn't. Yeah. I'm currently reading. I picked this up on a hostel shelf actually because I don't have the options a lot of times to travel with books, etc. So whenever I'm like near a hostel that's got a library, I'm like, let me grab an actual book. I'm reading. It's All the Women That Keep Me Up at Night, and it's an interesting Finnish writer. I can't remember her name right now, and she explores all these like female explorers from the 1800s and 1900s and their paths and what they went through, and it's a super good book. And right now she's kind of touching on the women are traveling to Africa and Japan, etc. So it's giving me super like, I don't know, travel jitters about
Yeah.
that.
Oh, I've kind of been diving into early female explorers from another interview I had that just got me thinking about that. So I'll have to look at that.
Yeah.
What is always in your suitcase or backpack when you travel, which we now know it's not books, but
A water bottle, a yoga mat, a wine opener. What else do I travel with? A portable battery. That's a big one for your phone. Yeah, like besides the basics, I travel with reusable or like collapsible. That's what I'm looking for. Containers that store your food. What is the word for that?
Yeah, like Tupperware.
Tupperware. That's the word. I also travel with like fruit bags that are cloth made. So when you're like in the grocery store, yeah. So I have all my eco-friendly like food items.
I love it. It's very different from a digital nomad perspective. I mean, some of the things are the same, but I love thinking about it as a way of being able to literally live out of your suitcase.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. What has been your favorite destination?
Oh, I just like this question so much because it totally depends on what you're in the mood for, right? Like, do you want a beach? Do you want the mountains? Like, what do you want to do? I would say like my heart always goes back to Colombia. I think it kind of has it all between like a city life to the jungle to the beaches. The people are just so amazing. So I'll say Colombia is one of my favorites, but I don't have a favorite.
That's fair. So you'll love this one just as much. Where do you still long to visit?
I long to visit. Number one is on my list right now. I really want to go to Georgia. I really want to, yeah, I love wine. I love traveling for wine, if you know that about me. So I know it's like one of the birthplaces of wine. I would love to do like a wine trip there. The food is incredible. I know it's got great skiing, and I think it'd be a really cool destination. So
It's one that every time I learn more about it, it does seem like it has everything and doesn't kind of get the press that maybe it deserves. So
yeah.
What do you eat that immediately connects you to a place that you've been?
Well, I've been eating a lot. This is going to tie back to Colombia. I would say, okay, ceviche, right? Like if I eat ceviche, it's like Peru, 100%. Yeah, good.
Who was the person that inspired or encouraged you to set out and explore the world?
I don't know, American Girl dolls?
That's awesome. That has not been an answer before, but my kids would probably say the same thing. I love it. If you could take an adventure with one person, fictional or real, alive or past, who would it be?
Take an adventure. I know she's got a lot of hate lately, but I still love Ellen DeGeneres. I would like totally go on a trip with Ellen DeGeneres. And I like literally watch her on YouTube, like the clips from her show, and like laugh out loud all the time. And anyway.
I could imagine that it would be a very joyous experience. And I think that it would be pretty cool as well. Well, Keri, thank you so much. This has been so fun. For everybody listening, I hope you stuck with us the whole time, even if you got uncomfortable. I hope that you get curious about these topics and just like find something and start pulling the threads of it a little bit. Thank you for sharing all of your insights and exploration of this topic with us.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's been really fun. And I can't wait to listen to your upcoming conversations because they're all super good. You have amazing women on here. So thank you so much for inviting me.
I appreciate it. Thank you.